true justice. Show mercy and compassion to one another. The Lord is righteous. He loves justice. Love tenderly those who are socially powerless. Uphold the cause of the oppressed. Maintain the right of the afflicted and destitute. Act justly, love mercy, and walk humbly. God's law is written on the heart of every human being. Treat people with protection and care.
Hi, everyone. This is Mark Curran, the host of Cross Examination on WSFI Catholic Radio 88.5 FM and WNDZ 750 AM, coming at you on a great topic today. And the show will deal with pornography in the schools. Specifically, we're talking to people from Kenosha, Wisconsin, which is a big part of our listener audience. And the group that is opposing what's going on with the pornography in the schools is Mass Resistance, is what their title is. And we've got two representatives from that Mass Resistance group with us today. Fellows, if you could introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Blaise Mahoney. I'm a parish member of Our Lady of Mount Carmel in Kenosha, Wisconsin.
And my name's Kelly Hutchinson. I'm also a parishioner of Mount Carmel in Kenosha. I've got 4 daughters that went through the school system and now have grandkids. And unfortunately, they can't attend the school system because of what's going on. So,
right. So, guys, why don't you tell us specifically what's going on in the Kenosha schools? And you all are both Catholic, right? And
we are.
That's the perspective that you see things through, the lens that you see the world through, and that's that colors your vision and everything else, right?
Sure. I think more than anything, we're just seeing, this ideology pouring into the schools right now. And the latest thing we've seen is just outright pornography in the libraries. We're getting a lot of different reports from parents. For example, kids go into certain classrooms and there's large homosexual flags flying or trans flags flying. If they complain about it, the kids are shut down. We've had reports of middle school kids going into a library function where they have a book fair and there's these different books, out talking about gender ideology and, questioning whether they're a boy. So, for example, my grandson might actually not be my grandson. It might be my granddaughter, So
right. So let me ask you something. Listening to what you're saying, and you're calling this pornography, the U.S. Supreme Court has defined pornography, and essentially it offends, and I'll pull up for you the exact definition, but essentially pornography is kind of a local issue. So Kenosha, Wisconsin, that's kind of a urban area. So I would think that what is considered pornography in Kenosha, Wisconsin is far different than what's considered pornography in central Indiana or central Wisconsin.
Yeah, I didn't know it was geological in its definition.
It is. So when you talk about pornography, tell me what exactly these books are saying and what they're doing.
Well, a lot of it's just perverse. It's full of graphic homosexual acts, very descriptive sexual activity between minors, even fathers with their children. The spectrum is so wide and gross, it's unbelievable. It's even hard to read. So, when I spoke at the school board, I actually read the definition from Merriam and Webster and Funk and Wagnalls, and yet somehow we were informed that public schools have some exemption when it comes to books in the school, that they can't be prosecuted. And we've come under attack for harming the sensitivities of certain people, and that this is supposed to be literary works of art. And it just isn't. On just a common sense level, you wouldn't want your children or grandchildren, anybody going anywhere near this material.
I think the proof in the pudding is, our opposition gets up and they use lots of, lovely terms about diversity or, don't ban this but when you print out the material, when you print out the photos, or you print out the verses from these books and you put them in front of the average person, they're aghast. They go, they can't believe it. They really this, well, I'm not for this. So, as to the definition of pornography, it's pornographic. And I don't care whether it's in Kenosha or Florida or anywhere else.
So the term that the Supreme Court uses is more, U.S. Supreme Court historically has used the term obscenity when talking about pornography. And there's a three-part test known as the Miller test. And one, does the material appeal to prurient interest? Prurient interest referred to an excessive interest in sexual conduct. And is the material patently offensive? And does the material have value? And essentially that's the standard. And as I said, the famous Supreme Court justice that defined it said he knows it when he sees it. And essentially it's supposed to be a local standard as well. Historically, the Supreme Court has said what's pornographic or obscene in one area is not necessarily obscene in another area. So first of all, I'm just going to hit you guys right out of the box. Homosexuality, I mean, our culture celebrates that today. And so you guys are kind of going against the grain when you consider that to be an issue regarding pornography or obscenity, aren't you?
I don't think so. So one of the things that we've stated from the beginning was, for us, it's just a pornography issue. We don't care if the pornography is heterosexual in nature, homosexual in nature. We don't care if it involves aliens or Martians or anybody else. If it's pornographic, we just don't think this material should be put in front of our children and our grandchildren. So it just so happens that some of the most egregious instances, and we've gotten 8 books removed from the schools, and they were removed. These books were removed because it was so obvious, it was so blatant. The school district was so embarrassed that they had to remove these 8 books. But the point is that many of them, of these most 8 egregious books, they did have that particular bent, and they did involve homosexuality. But again, that's not our issue. Our issue is pornography in general, of any nature. We want kids to be able to go to school and enjoy themselves. And
so you're talking about essentially what's happening in a public school system, though, and I'll push back again that it's essentially a community standard. And 2 faithful Catholics come in here and say that there's pornography or obscenity in the public schools in Wisconsin. Well, this is not a Catholic school system. This is essentially represents the community standards. I said, as Justice Potter Stewart said, I know pornography when I see it, but he's talking about that objectively that it's something that the average person on the street, and it seems like that would be a far different perspective than faithful Catholics.
Well, that may be true, but we don't know that. When I first spoke at the school board meeting, I didn't know what the school board themselves knew. And so that's why some of the people who spoke at the school board meeting, I wasn't one of them, but they read right from the book so they could make up. So it wouldn't be subjective. They would be able to hear what was from it. And when we showed them the number of books that were in there, and they looked at the material, to Kelly's point, they were aghast. They said, we got to get this stuff out of here. This is terrible.
Yeah. So in Illinois, for example, you've got books that are in colorized books that are shown to young children, teaching them how to perform fellatio and talking about issues like, sodomy, with young boys and what have you in the pictures. And it goes on down the list. And a lot of the books talk about essentially, homosexual relationships being the norm, and that if you're interested, you should explore this, and that there's no harm in doing that. So all that's been upheld in our state as being fine and not a problem. And Wisconsin, I don't know. I mean, is it, have you spoken to any lawyers up there with regards to whether or not you have a fighting chance in this battle?
I think, like you say, it's a community standard, but everything you've described is what we've seen. And as far as the standard that you've laid out, that the judge says he'll know it when he sees it. Well, when we show this to people, they know it's pornography. So there's no doubt in our mind. People can get in front of the school board and talk, and like I said, throw out all these nice terms about you don't want to ban books and this and that, but it's pornography. So it just flat out is. If you look at it, people, they're repelled by it. They don't want their children seeing this stuff.
So I would quarrel with y'all just from the perspective
Sure.
that we're living in a far different world than even 20 years ago. I think the overwhelming majority of Americans, it seems, are in favor of homosexual unions, and that they don't seem to have a problem with it. And if anything, the country as a whole seems to go further and further left, as evidenced even by the most recent elections, where the more pro-abort candidates won in states that historically were not really all that blue.
Mm-hmm.
So that community standard, how have you tested it? Your theory that this offends the community standard.
Well, for one, we bring it to the attention of the school board and the public. Overwhelmingly, the public is aghast at the material and that this is offered freely to children, free access. So to your point, saying, well, there's a trend that everybody accepts homosexual unions. Well, I must not have got the memo.
Right.
And
so Blaise, just so I'm on the same page as you are. And Kelly, I'm on the same page as you are, but the name of the show is Cross-Examination, and I'm pushing back because
Sure.
I think there's a huge segment that doesn't agree with us on this, and these are questions that these people would ask you. So let me.
Well, my answer to that, Mark, is just so you're throwing out the idea of the homosexual union, bringing from that point of view. Any material, if it was among heterosexuals that we've seen, we'd be opposed to that too. So this is not an issue that has to do with any one group.
That's correct.
If you laid this material out and it was of a heterosexual nature, we would get the same reaction, and we have.
Yeah.
So
is there an age that you think it's okay for these books to be in the library?
My personal view is that when it comes to family life and sexuality, these are personal issues within families. Different families handle these issues in different ways. It's not the government's place to be pushing one agenda a certain way towards kids. They talk about diversity. Well, there's many diverse views on this topic. And that's not what's occurring in the schools. One view is being rammed down kids' throats, and if they disagree, they're ostracized. So
let me ask you this: you're trying to, you got your finger on the dam, the finger on the dike, so to speak, of the and all the water is getting ready to explode, and you're in there in a library. Well, newsflash, gentlemen. Most people have phones. Even very young children have phones, and they can download the pornography on there. And if let's say their parents have a blocker, I'm of the opinion that a lot of these blockers don't work. I mean, I like Safe Eyes, but these blockers are not foolproof. And even if they can't look at it on their phone, well, they can look at it on their friend's phone. So the pornography is out there. Sure. So what would you say about that?
Well, my comeback to that is, if you have a child who could get injured in the kitchen with, let's say there's utensils, there's kitchen knives, butcher knives, and then, well, the kid could get hurt there. He could hurt himself with a knife. And then with that logic, you would say that it's okay to have razor blades out in the lawn and leave them all over the place, and that could harm innocent people if they could get hurt in the kitchen. So what's the big deal? There's razor blades out in the lawn. They could get hurt there too. They could just as easily get hurt in the kitchen. It doesn't make sense to, have one side and then say, well, because they have phones, well, they can have access to pornography that way. So we're going to allow it in a public school setting with adults, teachers who's supposed to be teaching them and educating them, and then have a free access to it. It sends a signal to them that's not healthy to me. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, but
well, Mark, I think it's a faux argument that you throw out there. So, but I do appreciate the argument. But kids have access to alcohol. I mean, if you go into any, house, you'll probably, if the kids go into the fridge, they might, see some beer sitting in there. Maybe their parents have some alcohol sitting, above the fridge or something like that. And there's certain rules, or in most households, maybe that stuff is locked up. That doesn't give the school district the permission to put that stuff, lay that stuff out there. Sure, kids have access to all kinds of things in this society that they're not supposed to be involved in. That doesn't mean, the question is whether that access is appropriate or not whether they can gain access somewhere else.
Yeah. So I think alcohol, I wish your analogy was something that I made that I would find more logical, but the reality is, I mean, you go down to, like, let's just take some neighboring towns in Lake County, Deerfield and Highland Park. I know Deerfield has these same books that you talk about in their public school libraries, and the overwhelming majority are all in favor of it. And yet alcohol is very different. In this culture we live in today, alcohol is very taboo. 21 you have to be to drink alcohol, but pornography is not. And other than a smaller segment, I think most people don't see the problem with pornography. You can look at statistics, and it'll show you that most people look at pornography. The overwhelming majority of people look at pornography. So I agree with you guys, but I'm just telling you, we're kind of in the wilderness on this one, aren't we?
Well, I don't know about being in the wilderness. It's like when somebody says, the majority of people think this way, and I don't share those thoughts. It doesn't change the fact that my feelings on this subject are such. It doesn't matter what the majority is.
Right.
So it always comes down to that.
So let me ask you this, Blaise. What is the harm with pornography? Because there may be some people out there that are listening. I think that men are more attuned to it. Women much more so than ever before. Historically, women look at pornography in far greater numbers than they ever have. But there's probably some women out there that don't know that much about pornography, haven't delved into it. So what is the harm with pornography?
Well, outside of the fact, again, it goes against my personal religious beliefs, and my faith teaches that that's not good. Pornography, statistically, I believe, leads to other violent crimes. And I don't know the stats on it, but usually people who have raped or been convicted of rape were into pornography. There's also
So that might have been the case years ago, but I can Google what percentage of Americans look at pornography, and I guarantee it's in over 90. So it's kind of hard to say that it leads to violent crimes because the overwhelming majority of people are already engaged in it. So they're not committing violent crimes. Sure, there's a segment that watches pornography and does violent crimes as well, but that's not the general.
So, Mark, I would argue from this point. So what's wrong with pornography? It's dehumanizing. It's very specifically dehumanizing to much more towards women, but men also. So it takes the marital act, something that where we participate in our species regeneration, and it makes it commodifies it. So it makes women, specifically women, an object it just objectifies people for the pleasure that you can gain from them. And I think I had read an article, I don't know, it was probably 10 years ago, about an FBI agent that he said in his career, he had retired, but he had said in his career, after the Supreme Court had said that pornography was legal, that the rate of abuse just blew up.
Yeah.
it just increased exponentially against women and children. And this was in his career.
So Kelly, let me just, I'm just going to push back. There's the Institute for Family Studies did a survey out there. 73% of women and 98% of men have reported using porn in the last 6 months. Total of 85% all on average. So
Mark. So I heard this saying. Mark Twain said, "There's lies, then there's damn lies, then there's statistics."
Right.
So
I think here's something I will tell you though that one of a longtime spiritual director of mine was a fellow by the name of Father C. John McCloskey, terrific guy. He was oftentimes my confessor as well, and this is going back. He's been dead a few years, but this is going back more than 10 years. That he told me that the number one offense that women in confession confess now is pornography and masturbation. And historically, that was never the case, but now it's just so prevalent. And so we could say there are lies and there's damn lies. I get all that, but I mean, there is, if you were to stand on a corner anywhere in Arizona, all right, I'm thinking of Winslow, Arizona, standing on a corner, but if you were standing on a corner in virtually any large American city and were to start talking about pornography and just interviewing people, do you think there'd be a lot of them that would be saying, "Oh yeah, that's terrible"?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think
they may say it, but they also, again, we don't know what they do when they get through, And
then I think if you put something in front of them and say, "Would this be good for your 14-year-old son or daughter?"
Yeah.
So I think there's a difference between our culture, sliding downhill and parents understanding what's good and what's bad for their kids.
Yeah.
My dad used to say, "Don't do what I do, do as I say."
And once again, I mean, it's just a very different world we're living in right now. I was listening this morning and they're talking about just how few people actually have children right now. And it's just, and I think that's probably pornography is probably a causal effect as to why people don't have children. Like you said, that they take an act that's supposed to be sacred and holy and they make it into a sport. And, we're out there trying to fight this. And I commend you guys for fighting it because ultimately it's that story of the starfish on the sand. You threw that one back in and saved its life. Well, how many are you going to do? I don't know. How many people are you going to save? I don't know. I'm just going to try.
Exactly.
As Mother Teresa says, we're called to be faithful and not successful. You guys may not be successful, but what you're doing is definitely faithful. You're drawing attention to something that is inherently evil and that has serious repercussions. Let me move to a different topic is still on what you're doing, but I'm of the opinion that why do we have public libraries, first of all? I mean, everything is uploaded on the internet. You can get all these books on the internet. Who goes to a library anymore? Do you think your tax dollars should be spent on a library, public library?
And I think there's a segment of society still likes the hardcover books.
But is that segment's kind of going bye-bye? I mean, is it
I
probably
agree.
Not the young people that are in school today?
No, I wouldn't think
So historically, what I've seen, in my opinion, having spent essentially a lifetime in politics, is that conservatives, you guys are unique. Most people, they go to church, and this is most faithful Catholics I'm talking about. They go to church, they say their prayers and this, that, and the other, but they're not engaged in the culture. They don't want to have anything to do with just, engaging in the culture might cost them financially. It might cost them relationships, and they might be scorned in their neighborhood. So they don't put political signs out. They don't do anything. They go to church and they think that's enough. That's not you two guys. You two guys are seriously engaged in the culture. Why is that?
Well, everything for me goes back to the tenets of my faith. I was told you be in the world, but not of the world. So when I'm approached by something that is vile, I have to speak out against it. I have to speak the truth in love. And that doesn't alter over time. It stays constant. So
the reason why there's pornography in these libraries that you visit. And the reason why the schools get away with this is liberals, people with a liberal ideology, and I hate that word because Christ was liberal on a lot of things. But let's just say an ideology that's at odds with people of faith, an ideology that considers people of faith to be the enemy. So those are the kind of people that run for school boards. Those are the kind of people that run for library boards. And, most conservatives or faithful Catholics out there, they think, oh, heck, why would I want to do that? Well, you're not doing that. You're kind of surrendering the culture to the people that hate you. Isn't that fair?
It is fair. And I think that's what's happened.
Right.
So when, you look at, but I've got family members in other states where they have a different bent, and they do sit on boards, all the local boards, and they have affected change in their communities. So Mark, I think you make a good point. If we as people of faith want to affect change, then we have to be involved at the local level. We do need to sit on these boards. We do need to run for these little seats, whether they're school boards or library posts or whatever they may be. So we can't affect the culture. Thank
you, Kelly. And that's a great point. I think one of the things that I like about what you're doing is the fact that pornography is just so incredibly addictive. So the sooner or the earlier age you're involved in that, the harder it's going to be to break that hold. And for somebody that doesn't believe it's addictive, just Google, the addiction rate of pornography, and especially seeing the images live and what have you that they do on the phones, it's even worse. So that's important. One, you're bringing attention to that. And two, I think from a Catholic perspective, I think we know that it hardens hearts. And we don't want, our hearts break for these young people, and we don't want their hearts hardened by pornography. Yeah. Would that be fair?
Yeah. And I think, one, you were asking, why is pornography wrong? Another reason is look at the stats, with family life now. Fewer and fewer people are getting married. Divorce rates are up. More and more children are being born out of wedlock. And all the statistics show that children do best when they're raised in a family with their natural father and their natural mother. Those kids do the best. They don't go to prison as often. They do better in school. They turn out to be more productive in society. So we know, our Catholic faith informs us very specifically that the family is the primary unit of society. And the way the family goes, so society goes. So pornography hurts the family, and it hurts the primary cell of society.
And just for listeners out there, pornography is a mortal sin, according to the Catechism of the Catholic Church. Yes. And so if you didn't know that and you're engaged in it, well, you better start going to confession to try to break yourself of that habit. There's so many great things that you guys are doing, and you wound up working through a group called Mass Resistance. Tell me how you became involved in Mass Resistance and who Mass Resistance is.
Well, I can answer.
Go ahead, Blaise.
Yeah. Mass Resistance was, the name is from Massachusetts, and they started fighting back, pushing back against school boards that were having pornography there, and they had success there. Then my wife was almost banned from the Racine public library because she wasn't really happy because they were having a drag queen story hour.
Everything happens every library.
Yeah. And so,
this get with the times, gentlemen.
She said, no, this is not kosher. And she said, this offends me. This is wrong. And they didn't like her voice, and they said, we're going to ban you. And so she was kind of questioning, hey, can I get some help so she reached out. She's a freelance writer. So she reached out to different media sources, and no one got back with her except our director, Art Shopper from Mass Resistance. And he said, well, you don't have to look into the Racine. You may want to check out KUSD, Kenosha Unified. They probably have pornography right in the school libraries. She goes, no. So she did a FOIA request, did put about 120 hours of research, not only pulled the books up, started reading from them, she shared it with me. And then that's the line that was drawn for me. I said,
right.
That's what got us involved, because this art shopper reached out and said, here, I can help you. And he put the scent on, go look here. And then from that, my wife and I, he said, do you want to start a chapter in Wisconsin? So we did. We contacted Kelly, and I'm telling you, and this is, I have to give credit where credit due. It was by the grace of God. The people that were put together in Wisconsin Mass Resistance, our efforts seem to have results like nowhere else. So I give credit to having grace and the right people. And they were willing to stand up and just speak the truth.
Right, right. That's a beautiful thing. And y'all are affiliated with a parish that's in our listener audience, and that's Our Lady of Mount Carmel in Kenosha area. And that's also the home parish of a priest, a very wonderful holy priest, who has his own show on this radio station, Father Dwight Campbell, and who's an expert in Marian theology, our Blessed Mother. So he's probably likes what you're doing as well.
Yeah, he's not shy. He stands up and he's counted right from the pulpit, and he encourages us. He backs us. He notifies the parishioners of what we're doing, and also encourages them to get involved, to stand against it. So that helps us. We all need prayer support. Everybody thinks that what they're doing, well, this is right. But it's nice to be encouraged and supported, especially by your shepherd at your local parish.
Yeah, and we're very fortunate to have Father Campbell. He's a very good priest, and he's a very good man, and he's a humble person also. So yeah, we're very fortunate to have.
If I could suggest something also that I think could be a fruit of the work that you two gentlemen are doing. And again, you're listening to WSFI Catholic Radio, 88.5 FM, 750 AM, WNDZ. I'm Mark Curran. The show is Cross Examination. And today we're with Blaise Mahoney and Kelly Hutchinson. And these two gentlemen are involved in a group called Mass Resistance. And they're trying to get the pornographic books out of the schools so that ultimately our children can grow up in a safer environment. Now, pornography is you guys keep saying pornography, but we're talking, I think we obscenity also, is that, yeah, so as it feeds into that, because there is a First Amendment claim that they have, isn't there, with regards to pornography? Don't you have a First Amendment right to have this? Isn't this a form of speech that's been found to be protected?
I think, wasn't there a Supreme Court decision back in the 60s? It involved, what was the guy's name? Flint. He was a publisher of a extremely obscene magazine, and on First Amendment grounds, the Supreme Court found that it was free speech.
Yeah.
There may be a free speech argument for adults. I don't think it holds true for children. I think there's other court cases that say that the government has a vested interest in protecting children against certain things. So I think there's other court cases that back what we believe.
So what I would say to you gentlemen is that having been a lawyer for going on 34 years, is that what is constitutional and what is not constitutional is always changing, and that's why it's important that we elect the right people and that they appoint justices that respect religious liberty and respect our Judeo-Christian worldview, and that's something that's desperately needed. So, let me ask you this also: where are we going? Where do you go from here? What's the end game?
Well, I think the end game is to get a policy, to get an objective policy in the Kenosha Unified School District. If you go through their current policies, everything about it is just generic. The Kenosha Unified School District does not have an objective policy that protects children. They do not. Their master policy was put together back in 2002. and their generic principles are it's just
Yeah.
support and enrich children.
Right.
You know,
So Kenosha City is very Democrat, very blue. Kenosha County is kind of purple. So when you've taken on this fight, is it more of a city fight or is it more of the county that you're going after?
well, I think it's more, Kenosha Unified is made up primarily of residents within the city of Kenosha. So, but I would say this, though, you're right. I mean, locally, the city is pretty much Democrat run, but I would say that Democrats in Wisconsin are not they're not East Coast Democrats.
Well, they have an openly lesbian U.S. senator, and they've been moving further left, I think, every cycle. So there may not be the same right now, but
that is true.
Yeah, they're not the
but
deep
where we're from, you mow your neighbor's lawn if they need help, and that's whether you're a Democrat or a Republican. So so I would say Wisconsin is still a place that has a high degree of what I would call just down home family friendly values. So
and the other thing that I was going to mention that I see as a fruit of what you're doing is you could be potentially building an army. As more people see the two of you out there, and Curran and Mahoney, your wife, and others that are involved in this effort, that they may join forces with you, and then you may be able to expand in terms of where you take these targets to make sure that our children are protected. Homeschooling is big right now. In Catholic schools. Catholic schools have been gaining. The Carmel Catholic locally did not gain the last few years, which is sad for me, but other schools have. And the biggest gain by far is just the number of people that are homeschooling is just going through the roof. What do you make of all that?
Well, my wife actually homeschooled all 5 of her children. And we had a term when we were bringing this to the KUSD, they would give us these lame excuses, and we called it whack-a-moling. They want us to chase around while they, put little patches on whatever our objections were. But I said to my wife, I said, I'm not going to spend all the energy to keep going to school boards if they're violently opposed to removing books. If we didn't start seeing results, I told her we'd have a better effort to start telling people not to put their children in public schools at all, just completely boycott them because of the potential harm.
Right.
You can't allow your children to be exposed to that environment and expect to have good, nurturing children being raised. What you're doing at home would be just totally lost when they went to school.
And Mark, another thing we're hearing, it's not just a matter of the student body census, the numbers going down. So, they'll argue from the point, well, people are having less children. But then to your point, more and more people are homeschooling. Another problem is they're having a huge teacher problem.
Yes.
They are having a heck of a time obtaining and retaining teachers because the culture in the schools now, it's lost. They can't. Why would you, it used to be a teacher, they got paid maybe a little less than scale, but they had summers off. They had great benefits. But now you talk to teachers. I know 2 young women that went into the schools. Anyone would die to have these 2 young people as employees. They went through the schools and said, I'm not jumping in there. I'm not going to teach. The culture is just,
I think
that's part of the problem.
So for the listeners out there, I think one of the problems, or not necessarily a problem, I think it's fine, is that Illinois pays teachers substantially more than Wisconsin, and our pension system is a lot stronger. So unfortunately, we have lots of people willing to come into public schools and teach garbage to our kids up here. But, it is what it is. So you've been listening to WSFI Catholic Radio. I want to leave these 2 gentlemen with the last word. Blaise Mahoney, what can they do to help get involved? What would you tell our listeners out there?
You can go on and check out Wisconsin Mass Resistance and join up. You'll get emails, you'll get updates. Go to your school board meetings, find out what's going on. Become active. Don't sit by the sidelines and say, well, there's nothing we can do. We've been overwhelmed by just our simple efforts of standing up and saying this is wrong. and it's gathered momentum, and I'd love to have you keep that momentum going. So please join us.
Kelly Hutchinson, what would you say?
I would say, well, what I would say is, Mark, you had made the point. Your argument was, well, everybody's doing it today. The culture is changing. What I'd say is, don't be a lemming. You know what? The lemmings get going. They're heading in one direction, and they just all go off the cliff. Don't be a lemming. Stop at the edge of that cliff. You know what's right. You know what's wrong.
100%. 100%.
Jump in and give us a hand.
So I want to finish just with two guys that are out there fighting hard. We'll say St. Michael's prayer, St. Michael the Archangel, defend us in battle, be our protection against the wickedness and snares of the devil. May God rebuke him, we humbly pray. And do thou, Prince of the heavenly host, by the power of God, cast into hell Satan and all the evil spirits who prowl about the world seeking souls. Amen. In the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.